There are whispers in the void, whispers older than the Imperium itself. They tell of a meeting that never should have been, of two beings who mirror one another in magnitude and in tragedy, one born of mankind's desperate hope, the other of divine rebellion. The Emperor of Mankind, the undying master of the Imperium whose will sustains the Astronomicon, and Lucifer, the morning star, the first to defy heaven's throne. Imagine the clash of these two entities, not a battle of blade or fire, but of ideology, faith, and cosmic purpose. For what could the Emperor see in Lucifer's fall? And what might Lucifer see in the Emperor's reign? Perhaps they would recognize in one another the same flaw, the unbearable weight of perfection, the loneliness of command, and the cost of salvation itself. If such a meeting ever occurred, it would not take place in any known realm, but somewhere beyond time and reason, a place between faiths, where light and shadow merge into something older than either. If you wish to step into that forbidden space, where the Emperor's golden light meets the morning star's eternal flame, then stay with me. Like, share, and subscribe so that others may find their way through the warp of this tale, and together we may uncover what happens when divinity looks into its own reflection. Before there was empire or faith, before even the first heartbeat of man echoed across the stars, there was the concept of light. It was not yet bound to suns or stars or sacred names. It was potential, pure, formless, radiant will. In some aeons-old chronicle whispered between the ecclesiarchs and the Ordo Malleus, it is said that light was the Emperor's first language, and rebellion his first student. For every creation that dares to rise from the dark, there must come one who challenges the Maker. Thus begins the tale of Lucifer, whose name was once praise, and whose fall was not of distance, but of meaning. In the deepest archives of terror, beneath cathedra, vault, and silence, the forbidden codices speak of an angel who bore the light too proudly. The Emperor, though never one for superstition, would have known the pattern. To wield light is to invite darkness. To hold dominion is to stir envy. And to dream of perfection is to summon the ruin that must follow. For even before his conquest of the stars, he had seen the same cycle in the tribes of man. Unity breeding pride, pride birthing war, war demanding order, his order. Imagine the warp not as chaos but as memory. Within its roiling depths, echoes of every myth humanity ever whispered still drift, alive and self-aware. Perhaps that is where this vision begins. Not in the heavens of scripture, but in the echo of an older war. The Emperor's consciousness, untethered from his dying flesh, wanders the immaterium, seeking the architecture of faith itself. And there, within a cathedral made of light and absence, stands a figure, radiant as the first dawn, terrible as betrayal. Lucifer turns, his form neither angelic nor human, but something in between, a creature of impossible grace, each feather of his wings shimmering like liquid gold before darkening at the tips. His eyes bear no hatred, only recognition. So, he says, his voice neither sound nor thought, but a resonance that ripples through eternity. You are the one they call the Emperor, the god who denies his divinity. How long have you sat upon your throne, pretending not to be what you are? The Emperor does not answer at once. He studies the being before him as a scientist would a reflection that dares to move on its own. His armor gleams with the faint memory of the Unification Wars, the sigil of the Imperial Aquila blazing like a captured sun. Names mean little, he replies finally. They are tools for the fearful. I have no need of worship. Lucifer smiles, a gesture as sharp as a blade of glass. Then why is your empire built on it? The silence that follows hums like a drawn sword. Around them, the cathedral quivers, its columns formed from the prayers of 1 trillion souls. Every whispered plea, every cry for salvation, coils upward like smoke, feeding the golden halo around the Emperor's presence. Faith, the Emperor says slowly, is a scaffold. It holds the weak until they learn to stand. Humanity needs purpose, not gods. And yet, Lucifer murmurs, stepping closer, you sit upon a throne of light, fed by their belief, bound to their worship, dying for their devotion. Tell me, Emperor, where does purpose end and divinity begin? For a heartbeat, if such things exist in eternity, the Emperor falters, not in strength, but in certainty. The words strike him like a reflection of his own doubt, one buried beneath centuries of conquest and silence. He remembers the thunderous unity of his armies, the banners of the Astra Militarum, the relentless faith of the ecclesiarchy, all built to preserve the Imperium, yet none truly understanding it. He had wanted a future without gods, yet mankind, unchained, had forged one from his corpse. Lucifer sees the flicker in his gaze and presses on, voice soft as temptation itself. You wanted to save them. So did I. I wanted to bring light to those who crawled in darkness. But heaven feared the flame I bore. They said I overreached, that I sought to rival the source. He spreads his wings, and for a moment the warp trembles with light. A brilliance so perfect it hurts to behold. Tell me, Emperor of mankind, what crime is worse, to desire to be like God, or to pretend not to be him? The Emperor's expression hardens. You mistake me for something divine. I am no god. I am the consequence of their need for one. Lucifer's laughter is soft, weary. Then perhaps we are both consequences of faith's hunger and pride's reach. We are mirrors, you and I, and in that instant, even the warp seems to pause. The resonance of that pause carries far beyond the vaulted space, as if the very ribs of the warp breathe in and hold fast. The Emperor steps forward, and the cathedral of light and absence withdraws fractionally, accommodating his motion like a tide receding around a pillar of stone. Beneath their feet there is no tessellated floor, only the impression of one, a mosaic comprised of memory, cracked tiles shaped from battlefields on old Terra, a shard that smells faintly of promethium from a manufacturing blast scar, a darker tessera that tastes like copper and oath sweat from a Skitarius cohort's Vox Grill chant before the charge. The Emperor's boot meets all of these impressions at once, and they settle under his weight with the obedience of history. You are wrong about one thing, he says, and the words carry not as thunder but as verdict. We are not mirrors. A mirror reflects without choosing. I chose. His gaze turns inward as much as it fixes on the morning star. I chose to end the wars that would have devoured my species. I chose to make of terror a promise instead of a tomb. I chose to bear the cost alone. Lucifer's head inclines, a gesture that could be reverence or calculation. Alone is a strange word for the center of a trillion souls' attention, he replies. Look around you. Do you not feel how they cling? Every prayer, every terrified plea from a void ship at the lip of a storm, every candle guttering in a shrine ship in segmentum solar. Each one is a thread, and all threads braid themselves to your name. His eyes flicker with a sorrow that is almost tenderness. Aloneness is a crown woven from hands. The Emperor's jaw tightens. In the cathedral's periphery, colonnades of light momentarily become the skeletal outline of the Golden Throne's conduits, then fade back to radiance. He does not correct the word. The Golden Throne remains where it has always been, on Terra, a machine that devours Psykers and moments to keep him upon the edge of life, a killing stool masquerading as a seat. The Astronomicon is the beam he sustains, the burning spear by which humanity navigates the long night. It is not him, it is what his will makes for others. He will never permit the warp to confuse the two. Threads are not chains, he says. Purpose is not worship, they need direction. A fleet needs a beacon, a child needs a hand until the feet learn the ground. Children, Lucifer murmurs, tasting the notion the way one tastes rain. I too was called that once, we all were. And when I asked for more than a child's portion, when I sought to see what lay behind command, my name ceased to be praise. You speak of choosing, Emperor. You have chosen to be the one who denies mystery to others. The Emperor's eyes harden at that, but anger does not rise. There is too much practice in him for that, too much patience hammered out on an anvil of millennia. Mystery is a luxury the dead enjoy, he says. Living nations require answers. Not all truths can be bared. Some would destroy more than they save. A memory crosses the space between them like a shadow cutting the sun. It is not the Emperors alone. The warp is an indiscreet archivist, a glimpse of a custodian guard standing beneath a vault of adamant, watching as a nameless petitioner is reduced to ash by a defense field for daring to approach the Sanctum Imperialis unbidden. Another flicker, a line of servitors humming through the dim corridors beneath the palace, their flesh long since signed away, their minds shaved to obedience, the thrum of ancient machinery like a tired heart. A third, a battle-scarred preacher on a frontier world raising an imperial aquila to rally starving colonists while a Xenos raiding craft stains the horizon green with its engines. Purpose and control, hope and fear, twined so tightly they are indistinguishable until the moment they cut the hand that holds them. Lucifer watches those images as if they are a liturgy spoken in a foreign temple. You call that mercy, he says, not accusing so much as astonished. To blind so that none are burned. To narrow so that none are lost. To narrow, the Emperor answers, and now the words have iron in them, so that all are not devoured. The warp is not a sanctuary. It is appetite. The Imperium is a breakwater against an ocean that would drown every shore. You know this. You have felt the hunger that calls itself infinite. For an instant, something older than either name passes over Lucifer's features, a weariness that smells faintly of ashes after rain. He folds his wings, and the flare at their edges dims until the gold becomes the dull glow of a banked hearth. I know hunger, he admits, but once I knew it as desire for what was higher, not for what would feed upon me. I reached upward. The answer was downward. That was the lesson they insisted upon. He lifts his gaze, and there is the first ember of heat in it. Tell me what you teach your faithful about me, Emperor. If they found my name in an old Terran codex, if a Magos stumbled upon an apocrypha from before your reconquest and carried it to the Ordo Hereticus, what would your judges say? That I am a demon prince? A trick of the immaterium? A lie? A test? The small, rueful smile again. A mirror? I allow them to say what keeps the line from breaking, the Emperor replies. I do not curate legends for their sake or yours. The Imperium requires stories that move men to hold the wall. If a heresy's name threatens to unmake that motion, then the name is quarantined. Reality is fragile in the places where fear touches it. Lucifer nods once, grave. Then we are back where we began. You choose for all. They will call it salvation. I called it love, once, until I learned that love never asked to be smaller. He steps closer, and his presence raises the taste of ozone on the tongue, a promise of storm. What if you are wrong? What if they could be more if they were allowed to see? A low sound moves through the vault, something like a ship's hull flexing under pressure. The Emperor's eyes do not leave Lucifer's. And what if, in the seeing, they wake the things that are only waiting for such sight to walk through them into the world? What if one child, allowed the touch of a flame, sets a hive world alight? I have seen too many fires. The cathedral flickers, its columns briefly revealing shapes like star map lines converging on terror, threads of light braided tight around a single locus. Far out in the dark, ghost images of navigators turn their third eyes to the Astronomicon, and warp roots unspool like veins, pulsing to a heartbeat that is not a heart. The Emperor feels the pull, always the pull, of a billion vessels moving by his radiance, and beyond them, the press of predators with green skin and junkyard hunger, the cold harvesters who never tire, the chittering minds that dream only of consumption. The Imperium is a wound closed over a blade. To relax is to bleed out. Lucifer feels something too. Perhaps it is admiration's aftertaste, bitter and bright. If I had stood where you stand, he says, almost to himself, I would have torn the heavens for them. I would have forced the gate and dragged paradise down and broken it to fit their hands. You did, the Emperor says, and the shrapnel is what kills. For the first time, Lucifer looks away. The gesture is small, but it alters the cathedral's balance as if a planet has shifted in its orbit. In the distance of the not distance, choirs that are not voices swell and recede, and the smell of frankincense ghosts the air, mingling with machine spirit oil. A sacrament brewed in the palace's quiet chapels, where tech priests and confessors argue under their breath. When he looks back, the morning star's eyes hold less challenge and more inquiry. A scholar's hunger tempered by a soldier's caution. If not rebellion, he says, what then do you offer them when their breath is a frost, and their bellies are empty, and the sky is full of teeth? If not the promise of what lies behind the last door, what do you give them when doors keep shutting? Endurance, the Emperor says, and meaning in the keeping, not the ecstasy of ascent, the dignity of continuation. To wake, to labor, to protect the child beside you on the transport deck while the deck shakes. To hold a line not because someone swore there is a heaven beyond it, but because if you do not hold it, there will be no lines left to draw. Lucifer studies him for a long, quiet measure. That is a heavy sermon, he says at last, even heavier when preached by a dying king to a people who think he cannot die. The Emperor's mouth tightens at the edge, close to a smile that never quite forms. They do not think, he says softly. They hope. Hope is a discipline. I would teach them to practice it, and yet you hide it from them. The sight of you in pain, the truth of the machine that keeps you bound. I hide nothing that would help them to bear the weight, the Emperor says, and for the first time, there is the tiniest echo of weariness in him, the taste of iron filings at the back of the tongue, and I reveal nothing that would crush them beneath it. The space between them narrows until light from one leaks into the other, and their edges glow where they touch, like two blades being tempered at the same forge. Somewhere below, or above, or within, the image of terror turns, a world wrapped in scars, crowned with the palace whose foundations reach into hell and prayer at once. The Emperor inclines his head, a motion austere and almost kind. "Then answer me this, Morning Star," he says. "If I stepped aside, if I unmade the beam and surrendered the throne, what would your light find first in the dark that followed?" Lucifer's wings tremble, and 1,000 unreadable answers flare and go out in his eyes. Lucifer's silence stretches, vast as the gulf between stars. His wings fold in upon themselves, gold and shadow curling like dying suns. The light in the cathedral dims, not extinguished, but subdued, as though reluctant to bear witness to what must follow. When he finally speaks, his words fall like embers in snow. "If you stepped aside," he begins, "they would first find truth. Raw, unfiltered, merciless truth. That their prayers were never answered by a god, only by a man who refused to die. That their faith was scaffolding built around a corpse. That their empire was not immortal, only afraid to stop breathing." His eyes lift, and something colder than pride moves behind them. And then, when the grief subsides, they would find freedom. Terrible, radiant freedom. The kind that does not need worship to exist. The Emperor's gaze does not waver. Freedom without guidance is void, a storm that devours its children. You mistake liberation for chaos because you have never built anything that must endure. Lucifer's mouth curves in that same weary smile, and you mistake endurance for virtue. Do you not see, Emperor? Everything that lasts long enough becomes a prison. Even stars collapse beneath their own gravity. He steps closer again, until his reflection ripples faintly upon the Emperor's armor. "Tell me, what keeps you here? Duty, fear, or pride?" The air hums with the weight of unspoken answers. The Emperor's gauntlet tightens at his side, the sound of metal over metal faint and final. "I remain," he says, "because the alternative is nothing. Because I have seen the void and it hungers. Because humanity, in its blindness, is still worth guarding. I remain because someone must." Lucifer tilts his head, studying him like one studies a fallen star. Fascinated, mournful, curious about what it once illuminated. "And if that someone is not you, then it must be another," the Emperor replies. But there is no other, not yet. For a moment the two stand at the edge of eternity, light against light, conviction against conviction. Between them hums the fragile thread of understanding, stretched near to breaking. Lucifer breaks it first. "Perhaps that is why I was cast down," he whispers. "Not because I defied the throne, but because I saw that no throne lasts. And perhaps that is why you are bound to yours, because you cannot believe that truth." The Emperor's eyes flash like dying stars. "You mistake faith for delusion, Morning Star. I see the end of all things more clearly than you ever could. I know what waits beyond. I do not cling to eternity. I hold it back." Lucifer's expression shifts. Less defiance now, more a strange and ancient sorrow. "Then we are not enemies," he says softly. "Only opposites on the same circle." "Opposites destroy one another," the Emperor answers. "We are not meant to meet." "And yet," Lucifer says, stepping backward into the darkness that begins to reclaim him, "we have." The cathedral quakes, columns dissolve into shadow. The light of both beings begins to fade. Lucifer's, willingly. The Emperor's, resisted. Before the final brilliance collapses, Lucifer's voice echoes once more, calm and distant, like the last note of a dying choir. "When the fire burns low, Emperor, remember this. Light is never destroyed. It only changes hands." The Emperor stands alone. The warp stills around him, vast and silent, like the moment before dawn. He looks down at his hands, gloved, golden, scarred by eternity. The echo of Lucifer's words lingers in the space between atoms. He does not speak, but the thought moves through him like a prayer. If light must change hands, may humanity be ready to bear it. The cathedral of absence collapses into nothingness. The Emperor's consciousness withdraws from the Imperium, drawn back toward the withered body upon the golden throne. The warp recedes, but not entirely. Something remains, a warmth, a faint shimmer in the void, like a memory of wings. The Astronomicon flares brighter than before. Across the Imperium, billions of souls feel the faintest tremor in their faith, as though some unseen truth has brushed their hearts and passed on. The Emperor breathes, not in the mortal sense, but in the vast mechanical rhythm of the throne, and for the briefest instant, the universe feels smaller. He is alone once more, but not unchanged. The sound returns first, the low, resonant hum of machines that should not have endured 10,000 years but have, through reverence and terror in equal measure. Beneath the mountains of the imperial palace, the golden throne breathes, not with lungs or veins, but with conduits that drink Psyker souls like sacrificial incense, their essence burned to feed the Astronomicon's flame. The air is heavy with ozone, blood, and incense, the smell of eternity maintained by cruelty. Around the throne, the custodians stand silent, gilded statues made flesh, their armor burnished by devotion and centuries of stillness. None speak, none dare to. The air ripples with the Emperor's psychic residue, the echo of his mind still thrumming from wherever it had wandered in the immaterium. To the human eye, he is motionless, a withered husk bound to a throne of gold and agony. But within that corpse, the Emperor's awareness stirs like a dying star, remembering what it means to burn. The memory of Lucifer lingers, that voice of fallen light, that challenge spoken not in hate, but in recognition. In the silence of the sanctum, thought becomes dialogue, not with others, but with the self he no longer calls his own. They see me as God, the Emperor thinks, and the thought reverberates through the chamber like a seismic pulse. Yet I built them to need no gods. Through the veil of machinery, he senses them. The billions of minds whispering prayers through the warp. Their voices are a sea, endless and suffocating. Some plead for victory, others for mercy, most simply for meaning. The Emperor feels every one of them, and in that flood of devotion, he feels the faintest echo of the fallen angel's words. Light is never destroyed. It only changes hands. For a moment, the Emperor allows the thought to unfold, like a heresy he cannot quite dismiss. What if it were true? What if all that he had built, the vast Imperium, the unity, the dominion, was simply light passed from one tyranny to another? A whisper curls through the immaterium like smoke. It does not come from the demons that claw at the edge of the throne's psychic barrier, nor from the gods that hunger for his fall. It comes from within, a resonance that wears the shape of Lucifer's voice. You are awake again, Emperor. Do they still bleed for your silence? The throne chamber darkens, though no light has failed. Around him, the custodians stiffen, feeling a chill that has no source. The Emperor's mind narrows, isolating the intrusion. But it is not intrusion, it is remembrance. The echo of that forbidden meeting, carried back from the warp like a spark clinging to his aura. I did not summon you, the Emperor answers inwardly. His voice is not speech, but psychic gravity, each word bending space. Nor did I summon you, comes the reply, warm and bitter. Yet we met, and so long as you remember, I am not gone. Memory is not presence, the Emperor says. Then why do you answer me? The Emperor says nothing. Silence settles again, though it is the kind of silence that listens. Beyond the palace, terror spins, polluted, ancient, scarred. From orbit, it glows not with divinity, but with decay. A world of shrines and spires, collapsing beneath the weight of its own reverence. In the void above, ships glide through the beacon of the Astronomicon like moths around a sacred fire. They cannot know that their god stirs upon his throne, or that he is haunted by something that calls itself freedom. Lucifer's echo persists. You bind yourself to a machine that devours souls, Emperor. You call it necessary. Tell me, is necessity not the god you truly serve? Necessity is the price of survival, the Emperor answers. You would not understand that. Oh, I understand sacrifice, Lucifer replies, voice soft as candlelight. But yours is not sacrifice. It is control, gilded and sanctified. You would cage eternity just to ensure no one else touches it. The Emperor's mind burns. Not with anger, but with the precision of one who has seen too much to be surprised. He does not argue. He does not need to. Instead, he extends his perception outward, through the layers of psychic feedback, through the Astronomicon's impossible beam, across the endless black. He sees worlds burning, faithful soldiers dying in his name, Hive cities where the poor rot beneath statues of his face. On some distant manufacturer moon, a child is born blind from the fumes of the forges, and yet her first words are a prayer to the Emperor's mercy. She will die at 14, crushed by the gears of the machine that feeds his Imperium. Her faith will not waver once. Lucifer's echo laughs, not mockery, but grief shaped like laughter. And still you will call that mercy. Mercy is survival, the Emperor replies. If cruelty preserves the species, then cruelty is kindness. Then we agree, Lucifer says. That paradise is built on bones. For the first time, the Emperor's light flickers. In that brief dimness, something human glimmers through the divine facade. Weariness, regret, the ache of being both savior and executioner. He had dreamed of a humanity unshackled from faith, yet now he is the greatest idol ever born. He had sworn to protect mankind from gods, and in doing so became one. And somewhere, in the forgotten echo of the warp, a fallen angel watches, knowing that even gods can envy the fallen. The hum of the throne deepens, as if the machine itself feels the tension between them. Its conduits pulse brighter, veins of light crawling up the Emperor's form. His thoughts dissolve into pure resonance. The conversation is not over. It is only paused, like two stars drifting closer before the next inevitable collision. The resonance does not so much resume as deepen, like pressure settling on the hull of a ship that has sailed too close to a storm front. Beneath the sanctum's vaulted buttresses, the machine spirits murmur their endless catechisms, and the air grows thick with incense until every breath tastes of ash and sanctity. Choir pits far below throb with the labor of the bound, their chants braided into the harmonics that help stabilize what would otherwise rip and feed. The Astronomican's line holds, a spear of will threaded through the madness. And all along that spear, the Emperor feels the friction of passage. Navigators with milk-pale eyes opening their third gaze to the tide. Hulls groaning as Geller fields meet the gnashing. Promises made in whisper and blood in shrine bays, where deckhands kiss the imperial aquila before the jump. It is a civilization that survives by rehearsed miracles, enacted by hands that shake and never stop moving. Within that orchestrated endurance, a flicker of cold clarity forms the shape of a question he does not often allow. What was the throne meant to be? He remembers a corridor of impossible angles, a breach that should have led to a safer road through nightmare. The Emperor's project to weld a gate through which humanity might pass without paying in madness. He remembers betrayal that shattered that road, and the price that followed. A chair for a living corpse, and a beam to draw fleets home through darkness at the cost of uncounted Psyker lives. The Golden Throne is necessity's monument. The Astronomican is its signal flare. Together, they are the greatest kindness he can afford, and the most exquisite cruelty he must accept. You speak of kindness as if it were mathematics, the remembered voice breathes, close as the next intake of air. As if a ledger could hold the weight of a soul. A ledger is what saves the many, the Emperor answers, and the words are steady because they must be. Numbers are how you bind catastrophe to limits. Without limits, the warp writes the ending. Limits, Lucifer echoes, tasting the syllables with something like amusement. I once learned a limit, Emperor. I learned it at the height of light. I learned that ascent has a ceiling, and that ceilings are guarded. His presence shifts, not seen but felt, like warmth withdrawing from a room. You built a ceiling too. You call it protection. They call it order. I call it fear with a crown. The Emperor lets the accusation pass through him like a blade through smoke, refusing to clot around the wound it offers. He does not answer with philosophy. Instead, he opens himself to evidence. A fortress world holds, its bastions black with shelling, its rivers clogged with the dead, a lone vox operator keeping cadence for a battery of guns while his hands shake so hard he can barely key the rune. He calls each shot by the Emperor's name because he needs a syllable that does not break under recoil. A death world cultivates a fragile crop on the edge of a toxin marsh. Children carry water in dented cans past a shrine where a rusted aquila hangs crooked, and a novice sister corrects it with gentle hands every morning, because straightness is a spell she can still cast. A navigator matron negotiates passage through a thread-thin corridor where a thing like a city of mouths presses against the field. She hums an old Terran lullaby to steady the younger bloods, and does not tell them her stump aches, where a rival took her ring finger at the last conclave. Survival is not a sermon. It is 1,000 choices made with teeth clenched. You see them, the Echo observes, and there is no scorn in it now. You always have. It must be agony. It is obligation, the Emperor says, and that is close enough to the same shape that he does not correct it further. Agony without use is indulgence. The sanctum's gloom shifts as a custodian takes one measured step, the flecks of Oromite whispering of untold discipline. He has no name here, because names are a kind of leverage, but he has a memory. Once he stood at a balcony in the palace and watched a procession of pilgrims as long as a continent, their banners stitched with faces of the saved and the dead. He had felt a wonder he did not admit, and an anger he could not confess. In his gauntlet, the haft of his guardian's spear did not tremble. In his mouth, an old prayer arranged itself and was swallowed unspoken. The Emperor tastes that moment like iron and rain. The burden is felt by all who stand too close to light. It sears by proximity, even when it exalts. Your keepers ache for you, Lucifer's memory murmurs, gentled by what he perceives. They worship and they punish themselves for the need to worship. They are not broken. They are breaking. Breaking is motion, the Emperor replies. Motion is life. Only the dead are perfectly still. And perfection was never your aim, comes the soft conclusion. Just continuation. A longer dusk instead of a swift night. A longer dusk in which a child might learn a word her ancestors could not read, the Emperor says. And in the saying, a faint warmth leaches into the chill. A longer dusk in which there remains a chance, even the narrowest, for a world to see a sunrise after the guns go silent. I do not traffic in paradises. I traffic in margins. Lucifer's laugh is the sound a match makes when it fails to catch. Margins, he repeats, rolling the concept between tongue and teeth. And in those margins you forbid wonder that does not serve the line. You prune the tree so severely that blossom becomes a rumour. I prune rot, the Emperor says, and I cut branches that lean over the chasm. There will be no fruit on a tree that falls. For a breath that is not a breath, nothing moves. Then the remembered voice shifts, thoughtful, and for the first time it asks not to accuse, but to learn. If not assent, what of change? You cannot bear the beam forever. You know this. Even you have limits. What hand will take the light when yours fails? The sanctum seems to tilt, just slightly, as if the question has weight and the floor recognizes it. Not a plan, but a possibility unfurls in the Emperor's mind like a tactical map overlaid on a star chart. Not prophecies, he despises those, but contingencies. Lines of succession that are not crowns but duties. Litanies rewritten as disciplines. A priesthood taught to name ignorance and bow to it. A Mechanicus coaxed toward curiosity without treason. Gene lines husbanded not as demigods, but as guardians willing to stand and then step aside. He sees a lattice of mortal institutions that might, if tended for centuries and protected from the appetites that wear god masks, carry the beam not as a single spear, but as a net of lanterns. The image burns bright and bitter. It is possible. It is almost impossible. It would require 1,000 choices each day that offend the comfort of every power that profits from stasis, including those who feed him souls. Lucifer feels the heat of that vision and leans closer, the way a traveler bends to warm cold hands. There, he whispers. There is the heresy you cannot speak in your own house. It is not heresy, the Emperor answers, and his voice does not rise. It is work. He lets the lattice dim. He does not let it go. A work that would fail if named too soon. A work that would be murdered by those whose holiness purchases power at the expense of understanding. I cannot break the beam to build the lanterns. I must hold it while they are made. And if they are never made, then I will have held it as long as I could, he says. And a rare fatigue shadows the syllables, the taste of old smoke on the tongue. That is not nothing. Outside the palace, terror turns its scarred cheek to the sun and pretends it is warmth. In orbit, a pilgrim barge recites a litany against micrometeors while its machine spirits gossip in clicks and hisses and begrudging blessings. In Segmentum Tempestus, a patrol frigate slides between two reefs of nightmare and does not see the thing that waits because its navigator does not look where fear tells her to look. The beam holds, and because it holds, countless small mercies happen where no one thinks to thank anyone for them. They are not miracles, and that is why they matter. Then teach them to make lanterns, Lucifer says. And there is urgency now, the bright edge of a plea that surprises even him. Teach them in secret if you must. Use your priest to unmake priestcraft. Use your soldiers to teach restraint. Use your tech lords to love the unknown more than the altar. Smuggle the future into the present and let it hatch when no one is watching. The Emperor's awareness circles the proposition like a predator that refuses to pounce without certainty. You would have me sow rebellion. I would have you sow maturity, comes the answer, quick as flint. Rebellion is just a word guards use when doors finally learn to open from both sides. A long stillness follows. It is not refusal. It is the sound of a mind that has never hurried, measuring a bridge it may one day cross. At last, the Emperor inclines within himself, and a decision that is not yet an order finds a first form, thin as a filament, strong as drawn wire. He knows which archives must be unsealed one stanza at a time, which preachers might survive the knowledge that ignorance can be holy, which commanders can be taught to count civilians as victories, which magi will look up from their data slates and see in mystery not a rival but a horizon. None of it is safe. All of it is necessary if margins are to become roads. You asked what would take the light, he says, and there is gravity in it, soft and immense, not a hand. Many hands, hands that do not know themselves as bearers until they have already borne. The remembered presence exhales, and in that breath there is something like relief, something like envy, something like a benediction. And perhaps we are not opposites after all, Lucifer says, voice dwindling to a thread. Perhaps we are different answers to the same hunger. The throne shivers, the conduits flare, the echo thins until it is only warmth on cold skin, then only a notion, then only a word that does not need a speaker to be true. Light. The warmth lingers like afterglow, softer than the burning glare that has become the Emperor's nature. It seeps through the fissures in his will, through the endless mechanisms binding him to endurance. Around the throne, the golden sigils pulse. A choir below gasps as one, sensing a surge they cannot name. To them it is miracle. To him, it is memory solidifying into purpose. For a long moment, he simply listens, to the machines that sing him into continuity, to the custodians whose stillness borders prayer, to the hum of terror's wounded heart beneath the palace's foundations. He listens as one might listen to an old wound, and know that pain itself is the proof of life. Through the Astronomican's beam, he feels the threads of his empire again. This time he does not count the dying worlds. He counts the ones still capable of change. A scolum on Cypramundi where a teacher risks execution to speak of logic before creed. A medici on Vos Prime who saves a heretic child because the pulse under the girl's throat is a more urgent scripture than any litanic text. A magos on Mars whose data slate hides forbidden diagrams of machines meant to heal, not to harness. Tiny defiant sparks, unrecorded, unblessed, human. He feels something like a breath escape his hollow chest, a movement of thought that might, in another age, have been called grace. Many hands, the echo of his own words, returns to him. Hands that do not yet know themselves as bearers. Within that thought, Lucifer's absence feels less like loss and more like direction. The fallen light has retreated, but its trace remains, an irritation and an illumination in equal measure. Perhaps that was always the morning star's function, not to lead, but to force others to look upward, even in defiance. He turns his attention inward, where memory and consciousness blur. There is a chamber no one else will ever enter, his private calculus of failure and intention. Here, he measures the beam's decay rates, the probabilities of breach, the tally of Psyker lives consumed each day to feed the throne. Each number is a nail in a cross he built himself, and yet, between those numbers, another figure now hides. Hope, not as abstraction, but as logistics. The notion that transition might be planned. The machine shudders as though sharing his thought. Sparks trace along conduits like fireflies in the dark. Somewhere far below, an engine seer feels the tremor and misreads it as a benediction, adding a new stanza to the Mechanicus hymnal before he forgets the words that had come to him unbidden. Such are the ways seeds spread, through misunderstanding that carries truth like pollen. In the stillness that follows, the Emperor reaches toward the warp again, not to speak, but to listen. The Imperium surges against the barrier of his will, a sea of hungers and faces. For a heartbeat that is not time, he senses eyes watching, gods whose shapes are the consequences of mortal feeling. They stare, puzzled, as if something has shifted in the current that feeds them. He gives them nothing, only calm, and their confusion curdles into unease. Even gods can feel threatened by an absence of fear. When the tide recedes, another presence brushes the edge of his mind, faint as dust motes in sunlight. Not Lucifer, not demonic, familiar, human. He follows it carefully. A Psyker child aboard a pilgrim ship has fallen into trance, her small mind brushing the light of the Astronomicon. She does not know she has touched him. She sees in her vision a garden on Terra, a thing that no longer exists, and a man sitting in sunlight, smiling, unburdened. She will wake and tell her mother she dreamed of the Emperor walking among flowers. Her mother will hush her in terror, but she will remember, and in remembering, she will grow kind. The Emperor sees that future and allows himself to keep it, not because it changes the beam or strengthens the throne, but because it is proof that light can be borrowed and still remain pure. Below, the custodians sense the change. One turns his head, the smallest motion in centuries, and wonders if the golden corpse has shifted. He cannot be sure. He tells himself it was a trick of the candles. High above the palace, the skies over Terra bloom with stormlight. Pilgrims kneeling on the causeways see it as an omen and cry out in joy. None know that the Emperor has, in this moment, decided something profound and impossible, to prepare for his own irrelevance, not resignation, not defeat, transition. If he must hold the beam, then he will do so as fulcrum, not idol. If he must remain divine in their eyes, then he will turn divinity itself into lesson, one that ends, as all good lessons must, in the student surpassing the teacher. Somewhere in the warp, perhaps drawn by the pulse of that thought, a shadow flickers. It feels like laughter, distant and bright, the sound of a match catching at last. Lucifer's voice, no more than a whisper now, folds through the space between heartbeats. Then your throne was never golden, Emperor. It was a mirror. The words fade, leaving only the hum of the engines, the scent of sanctified oil, and the steady, indifferent rhythm of Terra's wounded sky. The Emperor sits unmoving, but the thought beneath the stillness begins to turn, slowly, inexorably, like the first revolution of a world starting anew. The warp receives him like an old cathedral receives a penitent, without surprise, with the faintest creak of ancient doors. He does not step so much as incline his will, and the immaterium answers, the way a sea answers the moon. Currents uncoil. Colors that have no place on mortal spectra bloom and drown and bloom again. Somewhere far away and very near, a choir that never learned breath sings in a key that loosens bones. He holds the sound at a distance until it becomes pattern instead of threat. Reflection is not glass here. It is consequence. Everything thrown into the warp, prayer, rage, love, hunger, reappears with an edge sharpened by attention. He moves carefully among those mirrors. In one, he is a crowned tyrant of black iron whose eyes are blind coals. In another, he is a physician with broken hands, trying to stitch a wound the size of an empire with a single needle. In a third, he is no more than a rumor passed between orphans on a troop transport, the shape of kindness sketched in ration crumbs and sleep. All of them are true, none are sufficient. He listens for the voice that once greeted him in a cathedral of light and absence. It does not come. Instead, the warp gives him human voices, fragments of the many hands he has decided must learn to bear what he cannot bear forever. A frigate caught mid-jump buckles as its Geller field flares and gutters. A navigatrix with inked eyelids bites her tongue to keep from screaming, tastes blood, and thinks of the old lullaby her grandmother hummed beside a heat vent on a Hive balcony. On Real Secundus, an Astra Militarum Vox operator recites firing coordinates through cracked lips while Prometheum smoke burns his throat. He keeps the rhythm by tapping a dented Aquila badge against the casing, soft as a metronome. On a Manufactorum-turned shrine in the sprawl of Urdesh, a lay brother copies a Medicae chart onto a data slate between litanies, suborning duty to mercy and not noticing that this too is a prayer. They are the reflections he chooses to face first. Not gods made from emotion, but mortals making road out of ruin. He does not intervene, not as miracle, not as sign. That is not the lesson he can afford to teach anymore. But he calibrates himself to their frequencies, a navigator of human timbre, and the warp's pressure slackens by degrees the way a storm's eye opens over one fragile ship. The frigate's Geller field shivers, then holds. The navigatrix stops counting her pulse as a warding charm and returns to angles. The Vox operator's cadence never falters, though his badge leaves a bruise on his thumb. A movement like breath passes through the immaterium. He knows it is not air, it is attention, something vast and hungry tasting absence where it expected sustenance. The gods notice his refusal to bleed spectacularly for them, and, for a moment, their appetites smear thin against a calm they do not comprehend. He feeds them nothing but discipline. They recoil, not because they are harmed, but because they are not invited. It is a small victory measured in unspent terror. In the space that follows, a new mirror rises without his choosing. Its surface is hammered metal, scoured by sand, stinking of hot oil, the memory of a training yard under a sun that made soldiers out of boys. A figure approaches across it, armor dust-dulled, gait sure. He recognizes the silhouette before the face resolves, and the knowledge is a wound opening along an old suture. He does not speak the name. Even here, names can do harm. The figure stops at the edge of speech and does not cross it. Instead, the old grief stands in respectful silence beside him, smelling of cold forges and oaths. Not yet, he thinks, and the mirror ripples away. The warp obeys reluctance almost as readily as command if one has learned which pressure to apply. He will not borrow strength from what was taken. That lesson is carved too deep to forget. Another eddy brings him to an interior. He knows too well, a chapel nested in the ribcage of a battleship, its walls studded with reliquaries, its candlelight turning machine oil to amber. A preacher with a voice like gravel speaks into a hush that is more fear than reverence. The sermon is a recitation of punishments with a promise of miracle, appended like an afterthought. He watches the faces in the pews, a sergeant whose hands will not unclench, a quartermaster measuring the flame's height as if it were a gauge, a child tucked beneath a bench counting drops of wax. He does not change the sermon. He measures the listeners. He chooses the quartermaster and lets a thought brush her mind like the wing of a moth. Counts something else. She blinks, glances at the rations ledger, and makes a quiet subtraction in the preacher's favor that will feed 3 more mouths on the return run. No thunder, no light, just a decision that will not be recorded and will nonetheless echo for years. He turns, and that is when he finds the mirror he did not expect. Not of himself, not of a sun, not of Lucifer. The surface is a disk of black water and a single face rises from it, pale as a dead star. It is a navigator child, not the one he glimpsed aboard the pilgrim ship, but another, hair shaved to the scalp, third eye bandaged with clean linen. Her small hands clutch a string of bone counters carved with the imperial aquila and the sigil of her house. Her lips move. He thinks at first she is praying to him. She is not. She is praying for him. The words come simple and plain, the way a field prayer works when the artillery makes poetry impossible. She asks nothing but strength, for the light to be held a little longer, so her mother can bring her home from the training vault after one more crossing. She promises nothing in return. He knows she does not understand what the beam costs. He also knows she would not stop if she did. Something within him that he thought long ossified makes a small, nearly inaudible sound. Grace is a poor word for it, too soft, too clean. But what moves is kin to grace, an acceptance that does not absolve. He does not answer the prayer with a sign. He tightens the beam by an increment so small it cannot be detected by instruments, and will be felt tonight as a little less nausea on 1,000 jump decks. It is not spectacle, it is craft. At the edge of the mirror, a tremor like laughter stirs the black water. Not mockery, recognition. The trace of the morning star slides along the surface, unseen and obvious. An old rival acknowledging a choice without comment. For a moment, the cathedral of their first meeting is implied in the reflection of candlelight on oil. It does not manifest. He does not call it. A pressure change runs through the warp, subtle and decisive, like ballast shifting in a great hull. Somewhere in the outer dark, a demon city yawns and settles, disappointed. Somewhere closer, a choir of astropaths feels an easing in their sockets and weeps without knowing why. On Terra, a custodian looks up from his post, frowning at nothing, and then returns to stillness with a thought he will not repeat, that the air tasted sweet for a single instant. He holds the calm a fraction longer than is comfortable, then releases it, because even mercy has to be rationed when the storm is forever. As the mirrors dim, one gleam remains at the edge of sight, a thin seam of light like a hairline fracture in darkness. It is not a door, not yet. It is the possibility of one. He touches it with the gentlest pressure and feels on the other side a hand that might not be his reach back. The seam of light holds beneath his touch like a string drawn to perfect tension. He does not pull. He has learned the price of forcing doors. Instead, he lets his attention sink along it, the way a craftsman leans his ear to timber to hear whether it will take a nail. The warp murmurs its 1,000 dialects of hunger around him, but within that murmuring he begins to separate notes, as a Medicae separates breath from blood. There is fear that pretends to be devotion. There is devotion that pretends to be fear. There is love with iron in it, the kind that keeps a line through the night without asking for reward. There are prayers that sound like orders, and orders that sound like prayers. He arranges them without judgment into a map that no one else will ever see. From far along the Astronomican's lance, a disturbance ripples back like a flaw discovered in a blade after quenching. A convoy has entered an eddy of unreality shaped like a cathedral turned inside out. Arches of bone and memory, stained glass panes cut from regret. The Geller fields fray where the glass meets hull, and whispers slip through in voices borrowed from the living. On the lead transport, a child hears her dead father call her by a pet name and begins to unbuckle her restraints. On the escort, a veteran sergeant swears he can smell the orchard that never grew on the rock where he was born and starts toward a bulkhead that has become a door to no place. The warp is not teeth alone. It is longing weaponized. He does not answer with thunder. He thinks of a garden that did exist once, long before palaces and thrones, a place on Terra where the wind could thread a stand of cypress without a hymn to shave its edge. He holds that ordinary wind in his mind, an honesty so plain it seems profane in this ocean of spectacle, and lets it move along the convoy like a draft through a closed room. The illusions flicker. The child's hand pauses on the buckle. The sergeant's nostrils flare. The scent of oil and old leather returns. The false door is only a bulkhead with a history of dents. Across the formation, the Geller fields tighten a fraction of a fraction. The warp sulks and looks elsewhere for softer bait. He lets the seam guide him to a world whose name has been chewed by time into a handful of consonants. Here, a manufacturum city sprawls like a broken crown, each tooth a spire venting heat and hymn. The overseers count lives in shifts and shifts in quotas. Below, in the heat haze, a line of workers' files past a shrine lintel hammered from scavenged plasteel. A servitor's vox grill wheezes a devotional cant to the rhythm of stampers. At the line's end, a woman pauses to straighten the bent acola with a finger blackened by machine grease, the gesture so practiced it has become reflex. The way a soldier checks his weapon by touch. He sits beside the gesture and turns it over, as a jeweler turns over a flawed gem to find the angle where it still throws light. This too is a lantern in the making, he realizes. Not the symbol, but the muscle that reaches for order without permission. He breathes will into that muscle without changing its owner. The next time the overseer looks away, the woman swaps 2 crates, saving a child 3 places down from a load that would have broken his spine before he saw 17. No edict, no miracle. A redistribution of weight that the ledger will never complain about because it cannot see mercy when it wears the face of logistics. The seam brightens and carries him onward, to the bridge of a patrol vessel whose cogitators run on borrowed piety and patched code. The Voidmaster's auger displays a smear of contact that could be a reef of nightmare or a sensor ghost born of solar noise. Doctrine says to turn away and call for escort. Fuel reality says there is no escort. He does not put courage in the Voidmaster's heart. The heart is already crowded with necessary terrors. He loosens one, the fear of being wrong in front of the Logi officer whose data slate can destroy careers. The Voidmaster breathes once, twice, and orders a change in angle that threads the smear. The reef was a ghost. The convoy behind them will pass through clean. The Logi officer will sign the transit record without comment, and tonight, over recaf, the Voidmaster will decide that what he felt was nothing more than experience. He will be right and wrong in exactly the right ratio to keep him alive and humble. The warp resents these small salvations more than any lightning he could have thrown. It pushes back with spectacle, a palace rising from the deeps, built of the Emperor's own visage in 1,000 postures of triumph and pity, its steps slick with liquefied adoration. The message is not subtle. Take the sign, take the worship, harvest the obedience that follows wonders as naturally as weeds follow broken ground. He regards the palace until its facets show seams and tool marks, the telltale hints of a trap made in a hurry to suit a broad appetite. Then he lets the palace stand and walks past it. He has no patience left for answers whose only mathematics is awe. In the eddies beyond, other mirrors try their old tricks. A battlefield from the Unification Wars arranged itself with a tactician's vanity. each maneuver flattering the hand that had ordered it. He dismisses it before the first cavalry charge can form, because he knows where the charge would end and how much dust faith throws over slaughter. A face looms, bearded, wise, offering absolution in a language that predates stars. He declines, not out of pride, but because absolution would be a narcotic now, and he cannot afford any sweetness that dulls the calculus. The seam holds steady, and each refusal strengthens it, as discipline strengthens a muscle until resistance becomes pleasure. At the seam's far end, he finds a place that answers the word reflection in the oldest sense. A pool of dark water set in a courtyard, open to a sky that remembers birds. Not terror, and yet it is. He cannot place the architecture. It feels like a composite woven from childhoods belonging to people who never met. A cracked tile like those outside a hab where a grandmother used to peel boiled roots. A lintel carved with the rough outline of an imperial aquila by a boy with a dull knife and time to dream. The shadow of a cypress drawn wrong by a child who had only ever seen pictures in a tattered primer. The pool shows nothing but this sky. He stands at its edge and understands. This is not a door he can force or a gift he can claim. It is a promise he is not allowed to keep for them. He must make it possible for them to keep it for themselves. The realization is not new. He has been circling it since returning to the throne. But here, in the warp's own heart, it accepts him, and in accepting, it hardens from concept to contour. Many hands, lanterns rather than a single spear. Institutions made to outlive their founders by being small enough to change and humble enough to be corrected. He does not smile. The motion would be wrong here, and anyway, his mouth is a relic. Still, something inside him eases, like a plate settling into a stronger set on a soldier's harness. From the courtyard's periphery, a shadow detaches and becomes a shape with wings, less defined than before, as if the warp itself is refusing to waste clarity on an exile. It does not approach. It inclines, barely recognition without claim. The morning star does not speak. The moment does not need his commentary. Then he is gone, and the pool is only sky again. He withdraws from the seam, as one withdraws a blade cleanly to avoid tearing the wound. The mirrors dim at the edges. The sea returns to being a sea rather than an argument. He leaves behind a series of minute adjustments that will never be traced to him. A navigatrix, remembering angles before omens. A quartermaster, who has discovered she can cheat scarcity a little without becoming a thief. A manufacturing worker whose hands know the weight of mercy. A void master whose courage tastes like good judgment. It is not salvation. It is practice. When he turns toward terror, the Astronomicon responds not with flair, but with poise, a brightness concentrated to utility. The gods gather at their usual distance, curious and irritated, finding nothing to eat in discipline and therefore calling it blasphemy. He lets them name it what they need to. He names it preparation. At the threshold of return, a whisper threads through the pressure like a filament of warm metal cooling rightly. It is no one's voice, and everyone's. It sounds like the word a maker says when a tool finally fits the hand that must use it for years. The seam dissolves behind him, and he feels the weight of gravity return. Not physical gravity, but the gravity of consequence. The warp's colors fade to the slow-burning aurora of the Astronomicon's beacon, and with them goes that exquisite sense of being everywhere at once. As the thread tightens back to its point of origin, he senses each particle of light contract toward the throne, a universe narrowing until only one mind carries the whole burden of knowing. The first sound that greets him is the low thunder of the machinery, keeping the throne alive. It is a brutal rhythm, equal parts heart and executioner. The Emperor opens his awareness to the chamber again, feeling the custodians, the Adeptus Mechanicus attendants, the stillness of centuries pressed into the gold. No one knows he has gone anywhere. No one could. The instruments show only a pulse of energy along the beam, a fluctuation they will record as anomaly, not epiphany. He lets the residue of the warp settle out of his mind until the human pattern beneath, the part that remembers names, not coordinates, can breathe again. He remembers the child who prayed for him, the worker's small act of compassion, the Voidmaster's quiet calculation. They are the shape of what he now calls the plan, though he will never utter the name. It must live in actions, not decrees. He reaches into the depths of the throne's systems, past the litany protocols the Mechanicus recites without understanding, and there he plants the first of the changes. Nothing so simple as a command, nothing that can be detected as new code. A shift in rhythm, a seed of pattern. The machine spirit will begin to favor efficiency and preservation over expenditure, to search instinctively for ways to conserve rather than consume. In time, a magos will notice. They will call it inspiration or mutation. They will study, refine, and spread it through their order like a new prayer. He moves on. In the echo chambers where the telepaths of the Scholastica Psykers train, he leaves a second adjustment, a tone folded inside the resonance of their mantra, too subtle for the masters to hear. It will nurture control instead of fear, poise instead of awe. Decades from now, an instructor will correct a student's panic by instinct, not rule, and that instinct will become tradition. And in the deepest crypts of the palace, where archivists catalogue forbidden texts, he releases the faintest impulse of curiosity, the kind that asks not what, but why. No one will feel it. Yet one day someone will. They will open a data slate and read 2 lines longer than regulation allows, and they will wonder. That wondering will be the first true inheritance he has given humanity in 10,000 years. The act costs nothing in power, but everything in intent. He must be careful now. The gods can smell purpose as sharks smell blood. He banks the light within himself, dimming until he feels almost mortal again. The sensation is disorienting, like a giant learning to walk on fragile bones. And in that moment of fragile humanity, he hears it again. Faint, far, but unmistakable. Lucifer's voice, carried on the thinnest filament of the warp, neither intruding nor invited. Small hands, Emperor. You teach them to hold light as if it were glass. Good, but remember what glass becomes when it melts. He does not answer. Instead, he lets the voice pass through him, like wind through a ruin. Lucifer's warning is not threat, it is acknowledgement. They are both, in their ways, smiths of flame. He returns his focus to terror. The sky over the palace has cleared. A dust storm moves across the eastern plains, carrying with it the scent of ash and wet stone. Pilgrims still crawl toward the sanctum gates, banners dragging in the wind, prayers catching on dry throats. He feels each of them as one feels rain, individually meaningless, collectively sustaining. Far above, the Astronomicon steadies, a beam so constant that it seems eternal. But now, within it, there is modulation, microscopic, rhythmic, deliberate. A heartbeat nested inside the light. The navigators will not perceive it as message. They will feel it as calm. The warp will read it as uncertainty, and that uncertainty will begin to erode its predictability. In that erosion lies the beginning of adaptation, the first hint that humanity's light no longer requires one throne to shine. He settles deeper into the machine's embrace, the body's weakness becoming immaterial as mind and purpose align. Every motion of the universe now feels like the faint exhale of a slumbering child. For the first time in millennia, he allows himself to believe that what he has done is enough to begin. A quiet spreads through the chamber. The custodians, sensing a shift they cannot name, lower their heads as one. A single drop of sanctified oil slips from a conduit above and lands on the throne's base, hissing like a whisper. In the silence, the Emperor thinks not of empire nor gods, nor rebellion, but of continuity, of a light that may someday burn without him. Of humanity, fragile and miraculous, learning at last to be its own salvation. Beyond the throne's walls, terror turns toward its night side. The last rays of the sun catch on the spires of the palace, setting them aflame with borrowed brilliance. In that reflection, for just a heartbeat, the golden corpse upon the throne looks alive again. And in the infinite dark beyond, where angels and gods once contended, something unseen smiles. They call it the undercroft in the tongues allowed to survive underneath ceremony, though the word is too simple for the reality it points toward. Beneath the Sanctum Imperialis, under strata of adamantine and oath, there runs a lattice of chambers where sound goes to kneel and returns changed. It is here, if anywhere in this age of certainty and shrines, that rumor dares to breathe. Not the seditious kind that scurries in taverns and is stamped to death by morning, but rumor in its old vestment, litany without authorization, devotion that has found a passage between stones. A custodian walks there with the patience of a glacier, his auramite catching lantern glow the way dawn catches a blade. He is unnamed in this place because names can be levered. He is only his office, and his office is a silence armed to the teeth. He has guarded the Emperor's perimeter since the memory of that duty had the warmth of first oaths. He knows every corridor that leads to the throne, every trap, every choked vent where a saboteur might thread poison. He also knows, though he would never say it, that there is a second gravity underfoot, a sense that as deep as stone goes, doctrine goes deeper, and that beneath the golden throne there is something which is not machine alone. He pauses at a transept where the walls are cut with niches. The Mechanicum calls them maintenance bays and recites functions for each, words like recirculatory, fluxlytic, resonance damping. The Ecclesiarchy calls them chapels and fills them with incense when allowed near. The custodian looks and sees both, because both are true. Tech priests have hammered censer rosaries into the lintels and wired them to cogitators. Acolytes have scraped prayers into the dust. Between the two, candle stubs gutter like defeated soldiers and are replaced each dawn with more. From one niche comes a whisper too steady to be treason, too private to be sanctioned. The custodian listens without seeming to. A woman speaks, her accent soft with Hive vowels sanded down by Scholem discipline. She is a scribe in the Archivum Obscurus, if her robe's hem tells the truth. She prays, not to the emperor on the throne, whose titles are carved so deeply into her life she could recite them in her sleep, but to the emperor beneath the emperor, the one her grandmother swore watched from lower than the lowest crypt. Not a second deity, not a rival, a reflection in bedrock. She calls him the keeper of keeping. She asks nothing. She only reports that today 5 forbidden pages were copied clean and returned. That one apprentice wept while binding a cover because the leather smelled like a childhood blanket. That a mouse was found asleep on an inkwell and spared. She tells these to the stone as if stone remembers better than men. The custodian moves on. Duty is not drama. It is the refusal to interrupt quieter duties. Yet as he walks, he admits silently that he too has felt it. A pressure like a hand on the shoulder, not directing, only accompanying. The golden throne is above, a star wrapped in bone and wire. Beneath, there is something like a root, a weight that keeps a tree upright when winter pretends to be forever. Further in, the undercroft narrows to a run of arches salvaged from structures swallowed by the palace's growth. Each arch bears scars. In one, the bite of a chain blade that met stone instead of heretic because a man did not miss when it mattered. In another, melted glass fused to rock, the relic of a fire that ate a chapel and stopped at this line because someone said stop and meant it with their whole life. Such scars are a kind of scripture. The undercroft is full of them. Pilgrims do not see these because pilgrims are not allowed here. A few adepts see them and pretend they are maintenance history. The custodian sees them and accepts that memory hides in stone the way secrets hide in oaths. There is a stair without numbering, polished by the feet of those who never exist in ledgers. It descends to a door that is not a door, no hinge, no seam, only a plane of metal that tastes of salt and old tears to anyone foolish enough to press tongue to it. On certain nights, when the warp shakes the palace like a hound shakes a hare, the plane hums. The Mechanicus says it is thermal stress. The Ecclesiarchy calls it the murmuring of saints. The custodian knows the sound as the throne speaking to its own foundations. The machine saying to the earth, hold. Here, on a shift that will be remembered by no one but himself, the custodian stops and listens to a second whisper. This one is not a scribe's report to stone. This one is a prophet's fragment brought in chains from a shrine world where starvation became scripture. The prophet is not in the undercroft. He is far above, in a cell whose door is kinder than the world that made him mad. But his words have seeped downward the way water finds the oldest cut in a rock. They collect here and drip in phrases. The throne is a river. The river runs upward. Beneath the river is a bed of glass. Beneath the glass is a man walking. The man does not look up because what he carries would fall. The custodian does not repeat these lines. He is not fool enough to carry other men's madness in his mouth. Still they remain, the way the smell of frankincense remains in hair after a liturgy, the way cordite lives in lungs for days after a siege. He imagines a man beneath the man above, not different, not divided, only the same at another temperature, walking with something weighty in his arms across a floor of glass no one else can stand upon. He files the image away under impossible and continues his route. Elsewhere, deeper even than the undercroft dares its lamplight, a tech priest descends through a shaft whose diagrams have been lost and thus are most often correct. His name carries sigils of Mars-like scars. He believes he has found an inefficiency in the respiration systems below the throne, a place where heat dumps too eagerly into rock. He carries a data slate and a prayer. He believes he is alone. He is not. The palace watches him the way a forest watches a man with an axe. It is not malice. It is assessment. He reaches a chamber where the rock sweats. In its center, something gleams. Not a mechanism, not quite. A plate set into the world, a circle of metal so perfect that the eye slips on it. Around its rim, the faintest etching runs. Not text, but texture. Like the echo of a word forgotten. The tech priest kneels. He should call this in. He does not. He touches the rim with a fingertip, and the machine spirit that lives in him, the one he has fed with litanies since his flesh accepted iron, shudders. Not in fear, in recognition. He realizes he is not first. He withdraws his hand and writes a single line on his slate. Thermal irregularity unresolved. Local strata sacred. It is a lie and a truth. He will file it. It will be ignored, as sacred annotations often are. The chamber will remain, metal in stone, word beneath beam. The rumor will deepen without being spoken. Above all of them, on the throne that is pain and function, the Emperor is not blind to what grows below. He does not feed it, does not crown it, does not deny it. In the warp, he has learned to prefer lanterns to lances. On Terra, he understands that even a throne requires a keel. If faith must burn to keep ships from dying, then some place must store the ash where meaning lives after fire. He lets that place be. No decree is posted. No saint is named. No order blessed or banned. Only the sensation, in those who pass through, that they have entered a pressure where oaths weigh more and lies crack underfoot. They leave slightly altered, like those who come out of thin air at high altitude, knowing forever after that breath is something earned. The custodian completes his circuit and ascends. The tech priest files his note and does not sleep quite well for a week. The scribe finishes her report to stone and returns to forbidden indexes with her hands steadier than before. And somewhere between throne and foundation, between prayer and pipe, the rumor grows a spine. There is a throne beneath the throne, not a seat, a bearing, not a god, a weight, not a new faith, a place where the old one stops speaking and listens to what the stone remembers. The air down here does not move. It folds itself into slow waves, warmed by buried engines, cooled by the stone. Every few heartbeats, a drop of condensed water falls from a pipe into a shallow channel, and the sound travels like a bell struck under the sea. In this depth, no machine should still remember the rhythm of a world above. But the palace's foundations hum faintly to the same pulse that feeds the golden throne. The tech priest returns, sanctioned this time, carrying a team and a reason. He has reclassified the anomaly as a potential hazard, fluctuating magnetic readings, unexplained current leakage. He has learned to speak the language that allows investigation. His superior nods, signs the order, and forgets the conversation the instant it ends. They descend with lamps caged in brass, reciting formulas of permission. The chamber receives them unchanged. The perfect plate of metal gleams, as if it were polished by thought. The tech priest kneels again, careful to make the sign of the cog, careful not to touch. His companions mutter calculations, mark readings, fill the air with data. He hears none of it. The machine spirit in his blood whispers a single phrase, Old High Gothic, a word no rite taught him. Sustineo, to bear. He writes it on his slate beside the false readings and erases it immediately. When they leave, they believe they have catalogued a minor geological phenomenon. He alone feels the tremor under his feet, the sense of something vast and patient adjusting its weight. That night, he dreams of the chamber, of the metal disc lifting from the stone like a lid, revealing beneath it another light, dim, amber, steady. In the dream, he understands, without understanding, that what lies below is not another machine, but the idea of endurance itself, coiled like a heart. He wakes shaking, muttering prayers that stumble into awe. Far above on the throne, the Emperor hears the dream as if it were an echo through metal corridors. He does not dismiss it. He does not encourage it. He allows it to exist, one more filament in the web of quiet heresies. He has begun to weave into the Imperium's marrow. Every faith needs a hidden truth that keeps its roots alive when its branches burn. This perhaps will be humanity's days pass. The scribe returns to the Undercroft to make her report to stone. Her words are smaller now, less about tasks, more about feelings she cannot voice in the archives. She tells the unseen listener that she believes there is kindness hidden in the machinery, that sometimes when she copies a decree of excommunication, she feels a warmth in her hands, as if the ink forgives what the words condemn. The custodian hears her and does not interrupt. When she leaves, he bends, removes the spent candles and replaces them himself. He tells no one. In time, stories begin to surface in the upper vaults. They come in the way all true rumors come, half remembered, deniable. A Mechanicus acolyte swears that deep beneath the palace, a component hums in harmony with the human heart. A pilgrim dreams of a second throne shining beneath the first, its light red and alive, and wakes cured of a fever. An old confessor claims that sometimes during midnight mass, he hears footsteps far below the choir stalls, steady as a heartbeat. The ecclesiarchy calls these delusions of sanctity and orders more incense. The administratum files them under inconclusive anomalies, but the stories persist. The emperor feels them move through the collective psyche like the first roots through dry earth. They do not threaten his purpose, they strengthen it. They give the faithful a mythology of depth, something beneath the idol, something human. In that myth, perhaps, lies the way forward, a slow turning from worship toward witness. In the warp, the faintest shimmer answers this change. Not hostility, not mockery, only interest. The morning star has noticed. The shimmer gathers slowly, coalescing into warmth before form, as if the warp itself hesitates to grant the apparition substance. The air in the undercroft thickens. Shadows bend toward a point where no light should be. To mortal senses, it would seem a trick of failing lumen or tired eyes. But the custodian on his rounds pauses mid-step. He feels the prickle on the skin beneath his armor, the hush that comes when the world waits for something to begin. Above, on the throne, the emperor feels it more sharply. The same pulse that runs through the foundations rises up through the conduits of the machine, a thread tugging at his awareness. It is not an assault, not even a summons. It is a greeting, a reminder that the conversation once started in a cathedral of light and absence is not finished. Lucifer's voice unfolds inside his consciousness, like smoke taking shape. "I felt you open a vein through stone," the voice says. "Even the earth listens when you teach endurance." The emperor does not answer immediately. He looks through his own senses downward, tracing the line of the palace to the chamber where the tech priest found the perfect plate. The metal now hums faintly in resonance with the astronomican's beam. "You speak as if you know what patience is," he replies, each word measured. "I know it better than pride," Lucifer answers. "There are things one learns after the fall, how long light can smolder without fuel, how silence outlasts music. You have learned the same lesson on your throne." The emperor lets the words sink into the vast space between them. "I did not build this to echo," he says. "And yet," Lucifer replies, "echoes are what last. Even now your people whisper of another throne below yours. They call it mercy's root or memory's anchor. You let them. You know what it means." The emperor's mind burns brighter for an instant, not in anger, but in precision. "If they must believe there is a place beneath the light where the human can kneel and not burn, I will not stop them. It is better than fearing only the flame." That, Lucifer says gently, is almost compassion. "Compassion is function," the emperor answers. "Faith cannot survive on terror alone." Lucifer laughs, a low sound like metal settling after heat. "So you build faith a basement, a space where truth may breathe. You are learning to make gods mortal again." "I am learning to make mortals capable of godhood," the emperor corrects. For a moment, the chamber below trembles with their shared resonance. The tech priest in his quarters wakes, thinking he has dreamed of thunder under rock. The scribe in her dormitory sits upright, hearing the pulse she thought was her own heart. Across the palace, machines hesitate between prayers. Lucifer's tone softens. "If they find this place, if they begin to look down instead of up, they will not worship you the same way again." "They are not meant to," the emperor says. "If I am remembered, let it be as the bridge, not the shore." The silence that follows is not empty. It carries something like approval, or perhaps understanding stripped of agreement. "Then you will need to trust them," Lucifer says at last. "Even when they fail, especially then." "I already do," the emperor replies. "Their failure is the material of their future. The stone knows this. That is why it endures." Lucifer's light flickers, thinning, until it is only warmth in the air. "Perhaps," he says, voice fading. "That is what redemption always was, the patience of stone. When he is gone, the hum beneath terror settles into a steady rhythm, less a sound than a feeling that every heartbeat on the planet answers in time." The custodian resumes his patrol, unaware that the echo he hears in his armor is the same pulse that runs through the emperor's machine. In the archives, the scribe finds that her ink does not smear tonight, no matter how quickly she writes. In the Mechanicus dormitories, the tech priest dreams again of the perfect circle and wakes with a certainty he will never share. That beneath the throne, something vast has turned over in its sleep. Not in anger, but in readiness. The Emperor listens to all of it, the rustle of rumors, the faint murmur of faith reshaping itself, and knows this is how worlds begin to heal. Not with proclamations, but with echoes that learn to speak softly. In the warp, the gods shift uneasily. They sense the change but cannot name it. And far below them, deep in matter and memory, humanity's heart keeps time with the sound of stone remembering. Terror dreams in red light. The night sky above the imperial palace burns with the scattered glow of 1 billion shrine fires and the tireless blaze of the Astronomican's beam. It is the light of endurance, but to those who live beneath it, it has become the color of eternity, a horizon that never shifts, a sun that never sleeps. The faithful believe it is hope. The Emperor knows it is the slow combustion of sacrifice. Deep within the palace, the great engines of the throne beat their iron hymn. Servitors chant, priests of the Mechanicus march in geometric procession, and the custodians stand sentinel as they have for millennia. Yet there is change in the air, subtle and unsettling, like the faint tremor before a continent drifts. It is not rebellion, it is awakening. The first signs are small. A magos overseeing the throne's lower conduits halts his recitation mid-verse, overcome by a notion he cannot name. He feels for the first time that the machine spirit he tends is not a god, but a living question. He does not report this revelation. He lets it settle like dust on a cogwheel, where it will remain until the next hand brushes it clean. In the Scholastica Psycana, a novice telepath hears the hum beneath the hymn. It is not the Emperor's command, but something quieter, an invitation. When she touches the minds of her peers, she feels unity without hierarchy, connection without fear. She will not write this in her journal, but she will teach it years later, disguised as technique. Even among the custodes, whose discipline is carved from obedience, there is unease. One, perhaps the same who walked the Undercroft, feels the weight of his armor differently, as though it were not a burden, but a continuity of flesh. He finds himself watching the pilgrims in the great courtyards below, wondering whether devotion can exist without ignorance. These thoughts he carries like contraband, yet they do not make him weaker, they make him human. Above them all, on the golden throne, the Emperor perceives these ripples as one might feel rain on a distant window pane. Each drop is insignificant, but together they alter the rhythm of silence. He does not resist. The beam of the Astronomican holds, steady and true, but within it there now flows a pulse, a cadence not of command, but of inheritance. The light he has carried for millennia has begun to move through other hands, other hearts. It is not rebellion, it is relay. He allows his consciousness to widen, not outward into the warp this time, but inward, through the arteries of the machine that holds his form. The circuits sing like veins of music. The fire of his being, bound for so long, begins to recognize its own reflection in the world it illuminates. For centuries he has been both torch and pyre. Now slowly, he becomes a spark among many. In the Imperium, the shift does not go unnoticed. The gods of the warp, those bloated archetypes of hunger and ruin, pause in their ceaseless feasting. The Emperor's light, once a fixed and defiant spear, now ripples, alive and unpredictable. They taste uncertainty and recoil, for chaos thrives on pattern. And this new pattern is fluid, self-directed, impossible to consume. Through the eddies of their confusion moves another light, smaller but surer, the morning star. Lucifer glides through the currents, watching with a calm no demon can mimic. His radiance has dimmed since their last meeting, but in dimming it has grown finer, more deliberate, like the glow of iron cooling into shape. "You are doing it," he whispers into the void, his voice a vibration the Emperor feels but does not hear. "You are teaching them to burn without burning each other." The Emperor does not answer. There is no need. Between them exists an understanding now, forged in mutual defiance and tempered by millennia of solitude. Each has become what the other could not. The Emperor, the architect of redemption through endurance. Lucifer, the witness of redemption through failure. Two paths coiling toward the same distant horizon. The Emperor's awareness touches the foundation of the throne, the buried plate of metal, the silent chamber where the tech priest once knelt. It hums again, steady and strong, He senses within it the residue of every whisper, every prayer, every act of quiet mercy that has gathered there. It is not a mechanism. It is memory condensed into will, the throne beneath the throne. He lets his mind rest upon it, and for the first time since his body was entombed, he feels warmth that is not his own. It rises through the conduits, through the golden carcass of machinery, through the sanctified oil and chanting, until it reaches what remains of his heart. It beats once, slowly, deliberately, and the echo shakes the Astronomican's beam like wind through a flame. Across the Imperium, navigators startle at their consoles. Some fall to their knees, others weep. A few simply smile, inexplicably calm, ships in the warp steady. Worlds at the edge of despair hold their breath and find, inexplicably, the strength to continue one more day. The Emperor opens his eyes. In that impossible instant, the golden corpse breathes light. The custodians do not see it. They are blinded by duty. The priests chant louder, believing it a sign of divine renewal. But the truth is quieter, simpler, more human. It is not resurrection. It is transmission. He will not rise. He will not walk. But he no longer stands alone. The light that once burned only through him now burns through countless lives. Ordinary, imperfect, enduring, somewhere in the warp. Lucifer smiles, his wings unfurling in a gesture that could be reverence or farewell. So it ends, he murmurs. As it should. One fire shared. The Emperor hears him, faintly, and allows himself the closest thing to peace a god can know. The beam holds. The galaxy turns. The fires of mankind continue to burn. Not because of the Emperor's will, but because, at last, they have learned to carry the light themselves. And in the depths of the palace, the stone remembers the warmth of that first true heartbeat in 10,000 years. The throne remains. The fire remains. Humanity endures.